In this video, we'll spend some time considering beliefs about learning, beliefs about teaching, and how what we believe about learning and teaching influences the way we prepare for teaching. It's quite a challenging task to describe to you what your conception of learning is, or for me to tell you how you might perceive learning. So what I'm mostly trying to do with this video is to provide you with some definitions and descriptions about which research has found to be common conceptions, so that you can use these to help frame your personal beliefs about learning and to assist you in describing the approaches you take to teaching. It's important to have an understanding of these because whatever your beliefs are, they will have a major impact on the way that you teach, assess and organise your unit. There hasn't been a great deal of research conducted into the way that academics conceive of learning, but one of the studies that has been done does provide us with some useful definitions. Prosser, Trigwell and Taylor identified 5 distinctly different conceptions of learning, as described by academics teaching first year in the physical sciences. Although their study has that narrow contextual focus, there are many elements of the categories that are applicable across contexts, and so they're useful as a starting point for you to consider which is most similar to what you believe about learning in higher education. All of these are valid conceptions, so let's consider them in no particular order. Learning is acquiring concepts to satisfy external demands. Learning is a process of developing meaning by acquiring known concepts of the discipline and having knowledge about how these concepts are related. So this means that the student learns by building on what they already know with the accepted knowledge of the discipline and knowledge about how these discipline concepts are connected. Both you and the student know that they have learnt when they're able to solve problems they've seen before, when they can explain ideas that they've seen before, and when they can decide what knowledge is important in relation to a new problem. Learning is conceptual development to satisfy internal demands. Learning involves a process of developing meaning through the construction of a fuller, more elaborate and systematic knowledge of phenomena within a particular worldview. So this conception of learning means that the student learns when they develop a personal understanding of concepts from the discipline. Each student may have a slightly different understanding of discipline concepts as they relate to their world and their experiences of it. Both you and the student knows they've learnt when they're able to use and explain these concepts as they are and as they relate to other concepts and knowledges within the discipline, as well as concepts and knowledge from outside of the discipline. Learning as conceptual change to satisfy internal demands. Learning is the development of personal meaning through a paradigm shift in the student's worldview of phenomena in the discipline. So this conception of learning means that the student learns when their way of seeing things changes. New information, ideas and concepts not only build upon what the student already knows, but it also changes them and how they perceive things. So students know they've learnt when they're able to look back at how they once understood an idea and identify how that understanding is now different. And you know that they've learnt when they explore, explain, describe and share this change and their new and changing worldview. Learning as accumulating more information to satisfy external demands. Learning is the accumulation of facts, principles, strategies, skills, etc., which are added to or replace existing knowledge. So This means that the student will learn usually by rote, and they will replace or add to their existing knowledge with new correct knowledge from the discipline. Students will know they have learnt something if they are able to complete the type of exercises introduced and used in the unit and course. Learning as acquiring concepts to satisfy internal demands. Learning is the acquisition of concepts in the discipline where students know what they have learnt as it has personal meaning for them. So in this conception of learning, it means that the student learns by building on what they already know with the accepted knowledge of the discipline and knowledge about how these discipline concepts are connected, and that the learning happens because the student is self-motivated to learn and to understand for themselves. So there we've got 5 different conceptions of learning. Which of these descriptions then is closest to your beliefs about how the students that you teach learn? Which sounds most like your conception of what learning at university is? Once you have a good idea of what your conception of learning is, choosing or using a correlating teaching approach should be easier and will help you to have, as Brookfield recommends, a clear picture of why you are doing what you are doing. Those 5 conceptions of learning that we've just considered tend to map to a continuum of teaching approaches, from teacher-centred information transmission approaches through to approaches that are student-centred and focus on facilitating activities to support students to change their conceptions. So where do you think each of the 5 conceptions of learning would fit on this continuum? You might like to take some time to make a note of where each of the 5 sit, and then see which of the teaching approaches matches the conception you identified as being similar to your own. Do you think the stated approach reflects how you teach and plan for teaching? If you haven't already done so, you may find that completing Trigwell and Pross's 2004 Approaches to Teaching Inventory, which you can download from the link provided on this page, helps you to think about what your current approach to teaching is and where it might sit on this continuum here on this slide. Is there an imbalance between your conception of learning and your approach to teaching? Or are they well matched? Is what you believe about learning reflected in your approaches to teaching? What do you fall back on when making decisions about teaching? Are you driven by your beliefs and understandings about learning and of teaching, or by work conditions and perceptions of the teaching environment? Consideration of these questions should help you to define your philosophy of teaching. Returning to this continuum, it is likely to become clear that the technology and tools that a content-focused, teacher-centred might use in their teaching are likely to be quite different from those chosen and used by a learner-focused, student-centred teacher. If your approach focuses on the transmission of information and concepts, then tools that facilitate access to authoritative texts are likely to be in high demand. Interesting ways of presenting content might be drivers in tool choice and use. If the approach focuses on organising concepts, information and ideas so that they're easy for students to remember and understand, then tools that facilitate visual presentation, opportunities for synchronous and asynchronous interactions, or Small, short activities for students to check understanding may be sought and utilised. If the teaching approach centres on helping students to meet their individual learning needs, then technologies that enable personalised learning paths, that facilitate peer interactions, and which present content in easily navigable formats, as well as tracking progress, are likely to be popular. If the approach centres, or for those at the far learner-focused end of the continuum, then facilitation of student choice of their own technologies and tools, and the use of curation and networking tools could be important. So where do you sit on this continuum? What does that mean for the tools and technologies that might support your teaching approach? What does it mean for the role you will need to play when teaching online? Which tools did you identify as being relevant to your context in week 1 and 2? Do they fit in with your current approach to teaching? Do they support learning as you conceive it? Consider the unit or units that you currently teach or are designing. Have they been designed to suit your conception of learning and approach to teaching? Where is the role of the teacher apparent in the unit? These are some questions for you to think about as you work through some of the activities this week and on into the rest of this ELT 501 unit.